So M. Night Shyamalan split from 2016. People who know my opinions on Shyamalan movies know that I don't really care for many of his films. I have a very hit or miss track record with all of his movies. The Sixth Sense, I think, is his best movie. This, I think, is his second best film. I think this is a mostly excellent film. And The Visit, his film prior to this, I've really enjoyed too, as a decent found footage fan. So this was around the period in his career where I felt like he had a little bit of a resurgence with the quality of his movies. And I think it culminated quickly, unfortunately, with this movie. And Glass, the follow-up, I didn't care for at all. I barely remember that. But this has Anya Taylor-Joy in one of her earlier roles, right? This was right after The Witch. We have Betty Buckley, who plays the psychiatrist. She was the teacher in Carrie, right? And she was in another movie of his, which I don't remember which one. It's one of his not as good ones. And of course we have James McAvoy, who has 23 different personalities, and a 24th one starts emerging as this entity called the Beast after he kidnaps 3 teenage girls and holds them against their will in this underground area. That's basically, if you haven't seen this movie, that's all you really need to know for the plot. But James McAvoy's performance in this movie is fucking unreal at times, for the most part, through all of this. But I know that Joaquin Phoenix was supposed to play the role, but he ended up pulling out of the project like a few weeks before they started shooting. Interesting to think about Joaquin Phoenix playing the roles in this movie, but I just can't see anybody but McAvoy. He absolutely killed it in this with all of his roles, all the personalities, which, oh, what are their names? Well, Kevin Wendell Crumb is the actual person. That's his real name, which ties into Unbreakable, which I'm not a huge fan of that movie. It's good. I just never watch it, really. So the whole twist at the end of this, spoilers from this point on, that this is connected to Unbreakable, it didn't really do anything for me when I saw this movie when it released, because I knew it was Bruce Willis. I knew it was the character from Unbreakable. But did I really care about that connection? No, not really, because I've never been a big fan of Unbreakable. But it's a minor nitpick with this movie, and it's a personal thing mostly. But we have Dennis is one of the personalities. Barry, I forget the woman's name, the woman personality. And Hedwig is the kid, which is ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of stupid shit in this movie too. It's not exempt from that. So let's jump into M. Night Shyamalan's Split from 2016. Now, I think the directing's great in this movie. I think all the performances from the girls, especially Anya Taylor-Joy, and James McAvoy, as aforementioned, Betty Buckley's character as Dr. Fletcher, all the performances are great in this. It's a beautiful movie. The cinematography is great. There's an eerie atmosphere and a dark, dank feeling because they are underneath a zoo that Kevin works at. So he's been working at this zoo for, I forget how long, for several years. And I guess they just gave him a place to live underneath this zoo. It doesn't matter. But we see Casey, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and Claire and Marcia are the other 2 girls. And Claire is having her birthday bash at some restaurant or something. And she's telling her parents that Casey is the outlier, she's the weird one, which is fucking strange in its own right, because out of these 3 girls, she's the hottest one by far. And I'm going to take an educated guess that she's the hottest one in her entire art class, which Claire specifies that all the people she invited to this birthday party are from her art class. I mean, the whole beginning of this movie is kind of stupid. You have to stretch your believability a decent amount. They walk outside, the three girls, with Claire's father, and he gets attacked by Kevin and knocked out. Then Kevin gets in the car with the three girls, and granted, the two of them are in the back distracted on the phone, but Casey's in the passenger seat. He's in the car for so long before anyone says a word or freaks out or says, who the fuck are you getting in this car? He's in the car for at least 20 seconds, and that's way too long for a stranger to get into your car. I mean, they're on their phones, like I said, so they're distracted, but they hear the car open and someone get in it. But Casey's the first one to finally notice him, and he puts a mask on, sprays the two in the back right in the face with some type of knockout agent, and then assumably does the same thing to Casey, and then the credits play. And then we have them wake up in this dark underground facility that we don't know is a zoo until the end of this movie. That's like one of the reveals, and where the whole personality of the beast originates from, is from being in this environment. I will say I really love Casey's character in this movie. The whole side plot / flashbacks that we get, where we see that she was abused by her uncle and that her father died, and then the uncle was looking after her and was still abusing her, and we see that she's been through some shit, and that's why she's spared at the end by the beast personality of Kevin. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert on DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is the core of this movie. But one of the few things that I don't like about this movie is the fact that they gave him 23 personalities, but we only see 4 or 5 of them or something like that. We see nowhere near close to 23 personalities in this movie. And of course, how are you going to integrate 23 different performances and stuff? I get it. But then why have 23 personalities at all? Just say that he has multiple personalities. Don't even put a number on it. Or say he has 7 or something like that. Something that's not excessive. Especially that we have him changing clothes and stuff, which, as my research has shown, is very, very, very rare for people that have DID to take the time out of their time switching identities to change their clothing to reflect their identities. So like I said, everything to do with the actual disorder, and it is a very divided subject in psychiatry. You have to put all of that to the wind because none of it makes sense. Out of those 23 personalities, I'm going to guess 1 out of 3, and that's being conservative, are at least semi-habitual liars that would make shit up just for attention. So how do you know that he only has 5 personalities and 2 or 3 of those personalities are making shit up just to mess with the doctor, saying, oh yeah, I got 2 other ones here. So he only has a certain amount, but he has a certain amount of lying personalities that inflate the number. Alright, back to the movie. Also, I kind of don't like how Dr. Fletcher does jack shit throughout this movie to try to find a link between Kevin and his personalities and the disappearance of the girls. It takes her way too long to put a link between it. They show specifically within the first 15 minutes or so of this movie that Dr. Fletcher sees the news report on the TV about the 3 missing girls, and then instantly gets an email from Barry saying, I need to see you. And she don't put that shit together for this is a 2-hour movie almost. Over an hour, at least, if not longer than that. It takes her so long. And she gets clues throughout the movie when she starts suspecting that Dennis is pretending to be Barry, which again, I don't know how that makes sense because they're separate identities. I know they're aware of each other, but like Dennis could pretend to be Barry, or they could pretend to be each other because they know each other's personalities that well. I mean, none of that matters. But you see her get the email right after seeing the news report, and then she knows that Barry is not really Barry, that Dennis is controlling him. And she still doesn't try to link it with the missing girls or anything like that. So I don't like how she does pretty much anything in this movie. She's a kind of forgettable character. So a lot of her scenes is kind of the downtime throughout this, again, 2-hour movie for me. Most of it doesn't do much. Like when she's meeting with her colleague and they're talking about the science behind DID, or I shouldn't say science, but the theories behind it and stuff that she's going to talk at a conference, and that she submitted a video of a dog acting differently to different personalities within patients of hers. Some of it's interesting. Some of it, most of it, I don't know, just slows down the movie for me. So I guess the pacing's a little uneven in this, and that's one of the things that stop it from just being excellent, like across the board. Then we meet Patricia, that's her name, the woman drag personality, for lack of a care of a better name. And she says to the girls that Dennis is not allowed to touch them. So I'm guessing in like a sexual way is what she implies. And we find out in a bit that Patricia is the one leading this whole belief in the beast personality and trying to bring him into existence as the 24th personality of Kevin's. So then we meet Hedwig, and like I said, as over the top as it is, it's a 9-year-old personality. He kills it, but I can't imagine acting across from him and not bursting out laughing, like for several dozen takes. I wonder how many takes they had to do, because I'd be laughing, because it is very funny. There is a bit of humor in here, which there is in a lot of M. Night movies. It works for me for the most part here. All the stuff with Hedwig, his dance later on is insane, but it's fun. When we see him here, he starts talking about the light and how these personalities work, which again, I don't think that's a bad move. Don't try to explain shit, because it's just going to make me think more and more and more, and it's going to get me into my weird thought loops to start questioning shit when I shouldn't even be questioning it. So just keep it ambiguous. But he starts saying that they all sit in a chair in Kevin's head, and they wait to be in the light. And then whoever's in the light, that's the personality that's taken over Kevin's body. And the light is being like blocked by Barry, or it could be Dennis. I told you, it's confusing. One of them, I think it's Dennis that's impersonating Barry, because Dennis is the OCD one. And she notices that he skips the puddle when he leaves and says that's something, like basically says that's something Dennis would do. That's not Barry. So she already has the information that she saw on the news that the girls are missing. She got the email right then from Barry. Now she knows that it's not Barry, that it's Dennis. And they're talking about this weird beast creature that's going to come out as a new personality. And she still doesn't look into anything to try to link the disappearance of the girls to Kevin here. But yeah, Hedwig's great. It's still great acting despite it being insane. Then they try to escape through the vent in the ceiling after Casey smartly realizes that all the wall, it's new sheetrock. So they start banging up at the ceiling with their shoe, and they find the entrance into the vent. Now they're looking through the door and they see Hedwig, and I'm laughing a lot because I'm pausing it often on McAvoy's face and expressions, and like right now it's just him as Hedwig, like with the stupid smile. It doesn't have to do with anything, but they're looking and they see Hedwig, and Hedwig's trying to get in. Then within 10 seconds or so, he's dressed as Dennis and tries pushing his way in. I mean, again, you have to throw it all to the wind, but there's no way that that guy got changed into the new clothing of Dennis, especially with Dennis's OCD and everything. And he doesn't like clutter and germs. I mean, he would take a while getting dressed and ready, you would imagine, right? But not for this movie. So Claire tries escaping through the vents and ends up in a locker hiding from Dennis, and obviously she doesn't get away, and because he's so OCD, tells her to take off her shirt or sweater, whatever she's wearing, because it's filthy, then separates the girls. So it's still Casey and, fuck if I remember the other one's name, in one room, and then it's Claire in the other room. So I don't know why he doesn't separate all three of them, but I'm not on his team here, okay? That's right, even more to back up my point of how stupid Dr. Fletcher is. When Barry, which is really Dennis, comes in again for a meeting with her, a session, she clearly calls him out and says, I've developed a nose, after all this time for who I'm talking to, which personality, and I think you're Dennis, and says that directly to him, and says, I know that Dennis has OCD, and you've adjusted something on the table a few times since they sat down, so she knows it's Dennis. And then, even worse, she says flat out that Dennis has been banned from the light lately because he likes to watch younger girls dance naked. And she still doesn't try to find these girls or help them or look into it in any way at all. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so it's not whatever I said earlier that gave Dennis away a little bit. He doesn't skip over a puddle. He deliberately walks through the trash outside. And Dr. Fletcher is with fucking M. Night Shyamalan, which is something I say all the time. I don't like that. I don't like seeing him in every fucking movie of his. I get it. Directors do cameos. I'm fine with it most of the time. There's a lot of them I quite enjoy. And I know he loves Hitchcock. I bring this up with every video I've ever done on an M. Night Shyamalan movie. He's obsessed with Hitchcock. We get it. I understand doing a cameo where you walk by quick and have a line or two of dialogue and walk right away. Or if you're in the background of a scene or something like that, and it's cool when you notice, oh, that's the director there. That's all fine. But when he always writes himself in as a character, and he has to have screen time and stuff, it just bothers me for some reason. But he's running the security tape for Dr. Fletcher, and that's when she notices that he deliberately walks through the trash. And then she questions whether it's Dennis or if it's Patricia that's running things, which I'm pretty sure it's Patricia, right? Because she's the one who really has the strongest belief in the beast and wants to usher in his era of terror. While I'm being bombarded by ads mid-movie, just wanted to say this for people who don't know at this point, which I find it very hard for people to not realize, but it connects to a comment that I got on my Irreversible video a month ago or something like that. That video surprisingly took off a bit, and person obviously didn't watch more than 10 minutes of the video or so, because I make mistakes often throughout these videos because I'm watching the movie while I'm stopping, constantly to give dialogue and commentary and my thoughts on scenes that just happened. Sometimes I'll say stuff ahead of time from memory, and that memory won't end up being 100% correct sometimes. But it gets adjusted as the movie plays out. But I feel like most people know that I'm watching the movie live here while I record these videos, right? Pretty sure most people know that. But hey, the movie's back on. James McAvoy, man, he really nails this. Every single scene that he is in, the majority of this movie, he just absolutely destroys all of these personality roles that he plays, especially Patricia. When he's acting all proper and stuff and he's doing Casey's hair, but then he gets a little sassy and he throws one of these little winks over, these sassy winks to Marcia, the other one. That's hysterical. Then Patricia ends up, I don't know why it's hard to say Patricia for me. Patricia ends up bringing them into the kitchen for them to have a meal. Then Marcia ends up stupidly, there's so many different things she could have picked in this kitchen to try to incapacitate him or her. It doesn't really matter. And she picks the chair that she's sitting on to try to bash him over the head. And of course you don't get away. And now all three are in their own separate abodes underneath the zoo. And the chase sequences are pretty suspenseful in this. Like I said, the dark, damp, musky atmosphere, because of the setting throughout this movie, is great too. The score is really good in this. Most of the dialogue is really good. That's what pushes this movie along. Both the scenes with Dr. Fletcher talking with whatever the fuck you want to call him at this point, but Dennis, the one in the light, and all the dialogue between Casey, Claire, and Marcia with whatever the fuck you want to call him in those instances. That's what drives this movie until we get the reveal that the beast actually exists. And it's a great scene when Dennis is sitting with Dr. Fletcher and she's saying that she understands why he may have taken control of the light to protect Kevin, and that he was most likely formed, for lack of a better word, the personality of Dennis from Kevin's childhood trauma, which we find out is that he lost his father on a train, which Mr. Glass was responsible for. Right? Did I get that right? If not, let me know in the comments. And this is the conversation with Dr. Fletcher where he admits to being Dennis. So, again, she knows now that it's Dennis, and he has a proclivity for young girls and watching them naked dancing. Not to beat a dead horse, but it still takes a while before she puts two and two together. But she says to Dennis that the beast is just a fantasy. It's not the 24th identity or alter, as she likes to call them, and that she sees why Dennis was created to protect Kevin. And Dennis says Kevin's weak and we're the only ones that can protect him. So basically Dennis and Patricia took over Kevin's mind. And then seriously though, as I said, it's creepy and hilarious. Hedwig's dance to the crazy music, but he has his own room. Now, remember what I was saying earlier about why put 23 identities when we can't see anywhere near them portrayed on screen or anything like that? If it was just left ambiguous that he had multiple personality disorder or DID, and he has multiple personalities and identities, and that's it, then I would be able to suspend disbelief a little bit more and say, okay, he feels like he's a kid in this one, so he needs a kid's room. And the others, they're all adults, so they just stay in the same room as they, flip-flop through identities, I guess, through their minds. But by letting me know they have 23 identities, now that just makes me wonder, do they have 23 rooms down there for every identity? And there's 23 different rooms and different setups, all for the identities? That can't be right. And that brings up another thought. He works at a zoo, which is something we find out later on, but I think it's clever. A little bit ago in the kitchen, where Patricia was throwing some animal facts out there and was saying some fact about lions and how many teeth does a tiger have or something like that. So it does foreshadow that reveal. I think that's clever. But he works at this zoo, right? There's other people that has to see him. So my question is, how has nobody in all the years that he's been working here, no one's ever seen him act strange in any way, shape, or form. Nobody's ever said, yo, Frankie, why is Kevin acting like a fucking 9-year-old? Nothing like that. Why is Kevin being all OCD and cleaning the table 7 times? That's not like him. So they don't get to decide when they change identities, right? Because I don't think that's accurate to how any of this works either. He could just change. So what's stopping him from just being taken over by Hedwig while he's working the zoo in the daytime? This is such a fun movie. So after the crazy dance in Hedwig's room, because he mentions he has a walkie-talkie and she wants to use it, ends up trying to get a signal, reaches some person, I guess another person who works here, right? Because he said, how did you get one of our walkies? And then Patricia shows up and ends up taking Casey back to the room or dungeon, whatever you want to call it, the room that she's in, and says that Dennis will be the one to explain the events of this evening to you, and ominously walks out. As Casey's in that room, she has another flashback when her despicable fucking uncle is calling for her in the woods when they're on the camping trip and says, let's pretend we're animals again, like they were crawling around. And she has a gun and raises it to her uncle and almost kills him, and she chokes. But it's very effective. And then you see her breaking down Casey in the room. All of that's very well done. And then finally Dr. Fletcher shows up at like an hour and 12 minutes in. So, like I said, well over an hour. And she comes in and they have a whole conversation. It's Dennis that's in the light and he's getting ready to go meet the Beast, which is a great scene. The whole transformation, whatever you want to call it, from him and the whole, identity of the Beast coming out. But she starts to, sense that something's wrong. And she never even really figures this out or links the two of them. She's suspicious of why, Dennis is taking the light and why he was pretending to be Barry and all that type of stuff. But when she opens one of the doors, she has to use the restroom before she pieces out. And she's, looking around as she looks for the bathroom. And then she opens one of the doors and sees one of the girls lying there. And she's just in shock and just gasping, appalled, then confronts whoever you want to call it now, and ends up getting knocked out with the agent that he used at the very beginning to kidnap the girls. So she never really solved anything. She kind of just stumbled onto it. And the whole thing with the bent hanger that Marcia uses to put through the top of the door and reach the lock on the other side so she can get out. Get the fuck out of here. And okay, we do see a few other personalities, but it's on the computer that is only there just to give us exposition. That's the only reason this exists. But thought it would be fun to read off all 23 personality names. We have Barry, we have Jade, we have Orwell, we have Kevin, we have Heinrich, we have Norma, we have Goddard, we have Dennis, of course, we know very well. Hedwig, we also know very well. We have Bernice, Patricia, Polly, I wonder if it's a bird personality. We have Luke, we have Raquel, Felita, Ansel, Yalin, Kat, BT, Samuel, Mary Reynolds, Ian, and Mr. Pritchard. Those are the 23 identities of Kevin Wendell Crumb. But all the stuff with the Beast emerging on the train, climbing on top of it, and running at fucking ferocious speeds, and then the cops see him and the dog goes crazy, and all of that looks great. And then he ends up back at his abode, and Dr. Fletcher wakes up, and man, all of the veins coming out of him and stuff. That looks gnarly. Dr. Fletcher gets bear hugged and her anatomy is crushed to hell by the Beast. And then Casey leaves the exposition computer and goes to Claire's room. And I like how she gets pulled right out of frame, and you know that the beast is there, and you hear the sounds that he's eating her. All that's cool too. But most of the whole ending here is great, with him climbing on the walls, and then he's chasing Casey, and then eventually she gets in like the cage, and he's pulling the bars apart with that crazy strength of the beast. Oh, that's cool. Then he sees, that she's pure, that she's been harmed, that she's been abused. And that's why he lets her go, because he feels that's the injustice that's been done to Kevin and the identities and stuff all this time. He was abused by his mother as a kid. So anyone who hasn't suffered abuse in some way is, has to atone for it or something like that. But then they have the whole thing that Fletcher wrote down on a piece of paper that Casey sees, and it says, say his full name. It'll bring him back to sanity. And she mentions this earlier, right to Dennis in a session with him, a conversation with him. I can bring you back right now by saying your full name, but I wouldn't want to do that because it would have all the identities fighting for the light and blah, 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 blah. So Casey says his full name, and it turns into Kevin. And he realizes that he's been out of control for like 2 years or so, that he has no recollection of anything past like September of 2014. And he tells her, I have a shotgun and the shells are in my closet. Kill me. Then after that, first of all, great with him switching between personalities and stuff, like saying a few lines and then going to the next one. Again, we do see one or two of the other ones, but still, for me, it's not enough to warrant throwing out there that he has 23 personalities. So then she tries saying it again, his full name, Kevin Wendell Crumb. And Patricia says that it's not going to work this time. You can say it all you want. We put Kevin fast asleep, far away. Why doesn't it work again? Like, they give no explanation to why it doesn't work. The only reason it doesn't work again is for the plot. But if it did work, like she hinted at in that scene, Dr. Fletcher with Dennis, then wouldn't a great cure to keep Kevin all the time just be headphones and have a tape play on continuous loop saying Kevin Wendell Crumb? Wouldn't that like bring him back every single time that he goes and slips out into another identity? Nothing. So Casey ends up getting rescued, and this is where we get the reveal where she sees the tigers overhead that were at the Philadelphia Zoo. And even though he gets shot a few times, Kevin ends up getting away, and great little final scene with him going back and forth between personalities again, mostly just Patricia, Dennis, and Hedwig. And then, remember I said earlier, this is Philly, you see in the diner and hear on the news about the murderer, Kevin Crumb, and that they're calling him the Horde, which I think is a stupid name, but whatever. And one of the people at the diner, the girl, she ends up saying, oh, that reminds me of that other guy they threw in prison 15 years ago. They gave a name to. And then we see David Dunn, and he says, Mr. Glass. And she says, oh, that's right. In 15 years, there hasn't been another crazy killer that made the news that they gave a name to, that she instantly goes back 15 years to Mr. Glass. It's Philly. But that's the tie-in to the Unbreakable universe, so then we got Glass after this. But that split from 2016. Yeah, this is my second favorite Shyamalan film. And despite it having stupid stuff, like a lot of his movies, pretty much all of them, I think the performances are great. McAvoy's obviously being the standout is excellent. The premise is cool, the directing's great, the cinematography's great, the score is good. There's a lot of suspenseful scenes throughout this. Great movie. But alright guys, I'll be traveling home tomorrow. Hope everyone's having a great morning, afternoon, or night. I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Alright, so this was around the period, and Claire is having like a birthday party for her birthday, I was going to say, but that's obvious. But almost everything for this ending is great. And with McAvoy's, we have Barry, Mary Reynolds. Dr. Fletcher gets bare. So then when he's chasing after Anya Taylor-Joy's character's name, which would be KC. So then one of them, Patricia, Dennis, I think it might be, and that's why she's spared at the end by the beast, whatever. But he's running the security tape for Mr. But he's running the security. Then we have Patricia bringing. They show specifically in the first 10 minutes of this movie, 15, whatever, it doesn't matter. They show specifically within the first 15 minutes or so of this movie that